Okay, so welcome to the Winners Win podcast. I am very excited to have this conversation. I know I say it every week, but this particular one, I'm super excited. I think that when it comes to sensitive conversations, there are just right up there, you generally find politics and religion. I think that in recent times, BE has joined that category of conversation. It is now reserved for, private and intimate settings where you feel like it's a safe space, and we can't have a public discourse without it totally disintegrating either into, a super high emotive conversation, people getting rude with each other, and then just, passing blame to the point where we can't even see eye to eye on what the discussion is. That generally affects the discussion flow. What I want to do today is have a very mechanical conversation. As a builder, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, I believe in unit economics. I believe in extracting the numbers, the data, the receipts, the facts, and getting a sense of what we as the next generation have to do. In order to do that, I have none other than Duma Gqubule, who's joining us today. I think over 20 years as an economist, an analyst, and someone who has the gravitas to hold this conversation with us. And so, Duma, welcome to the Winners Win.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. I was having a personal crisis, a flare-up on social media.
Okay.
It's somehow I got involved with, but I'm fine.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, but anyway,
I've never been involved in one of those. What actually?
No. I don't want to go into the details.
Okay.
But anyway,
Okay.
but no, I'm fine. Yeah.
You're good.
I'm
apart
good,
from that little.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So, and then what's the typical week like for you?
Well, I've just finished a job now for an organization called TIPS, doing an analysis of the, government wanted to set up this transformation fund, 100 billion rands for Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. Mm-hmm. So they asked me, because of my expertise, to look into the whole thing. So all of these research jobs, they usually take longer than you thought they would.
Right.
I'm familiar with the topic of BE, mm-hmm. but this one, even though it's something that I'm familiar with, took me longer than I thought it would. Yeah. So,
Are you at a point where you can talk about that fund, or we have to wait?
No, we can talk about it in general terms. Yeah. I'm also very transparent. I don't think that discussions should be, secret.
Totally secretive. Yeah. What is it about this research project that made it attractive for you?
Well, Saul just called me, and he says that Saul is from TIPS, and he called me as the executive director. And but it's something that's been in the news, and there are a lot of people who are saying that we shouldn't set up this fund, and the DA, some of the business organizations, and why would you not want to have a fund that provides finance for Black people?
Right.
In your work, as you're telling me, you talk about entrepreneurs, and there's this finance gap of 350 billion rands that everyone talks about, and what the entrepreneurs get is completely inadequate. So why would someone in their right mind be opposed to it?
Right.
But obviously the argument is that the ANC is going to loot the money and whatever, But then I was, the company that is sponsoring it, wouldn't have given the birth to it, is the National Empowerment Fund.
Right.
Now, the National Empowerment Fund has been operating for, I think, 21 years.
Right.
It has never been capitalized by the government since the initial capital injection in 2005, I think 2004, 2005. And they've had 21 consecutive clean audits. The fact that this organization has been allowed, has survived for so long,
right.
People pay the loans and then, they give it to other people without government support. Surely you can't blanket everybody and say the whole of the government is incompetent and corrupt and whatever. And I can't, in the time that I've been following this company, see any links with corruption. And so I don't know. That's but yeah. That's what I've been working on. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. So based on their history, you think that they are perfectly positioned to
no. I think in terms of the implementation, I don't think the NEF is going to be the one that implements it. Yeah. Okay. So they've got a whole governance thing. It's going to be co-governed with the private sector. Okay. And I think that, it's going to be co-governed with the private sector.
Is this an extension of sort of BE initiatives? Or
it's a BE initiative. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Let's get into that. How would you describe your journey with the evolution of BE? How does one get a phone call to say, hey, we're drafting this new policy?
Okay, it's a long story, but yeah.
So what is that like?
That's a good question. Yeah. So let me just tell you, I went to school in Eswatini, my high school, and after high school, I went to study university in Scotland. Right. So I come back after the start of our democracy, and I work in the media. And Ted, I wasn't apolitical, but I used to go with the flow, and I had almost like a little bit of coconut tendencies. So I'd go and drink with the white boys at the sunny side, whatever.
Yes.
But anyway, so then I think what changed my my path is that I worked for a magazine called Enterprise under Tami Mazwai. Yeah. And Tami Mazwai, I used to just follow him. I was young, innocent. So he would introduce me to all these people. Like the next day, I'm with Jomas Ono. I'm with Kezam Taung. They're setting up a, I think they were buying into Pepsi. Okay. And I'm there. So all these initial BE transactions that happened, I was there. Oh, wow. But at the time, I'm not seeing, you don't recognize the importance of what's happening in front of you. Right. And at the time, and when you look back, it was a truly special, although I wasn't there for very long, it was a truly special time. And there was a lot of the innocence of the start of the democracy. And so that's how I got into it. And so, in terms of BE, let me just give you a little bit of history, about South African. So the South African economy, or as everybody knows, there was a discovery of gold and other minerals later on in the late 19th century. So it consolidated around 7 mining companies. The largest was Anglo-American. There was General Mining, those Rand Mines, Johannesburg Consolidated Investments. And, fast forward to then Anglo becomes by far the biggest of these companies. It starts taking over some of these other companies, of the 7, like Rand Mines in the 50s, I think, and they become a very big company. By 1994, they owned about 43% of the shares on the JSE. And these companies also, because they had capital controls, because of apartheid, they couldn't invest outside. So they diversified into industry, they diversified into finance. Right. So they had shares in all these money. So what happened in the 60s, initially it was mostly English capital, and there was a division between English and Afrikaner capital. Yeah. Yes. So what happens is that in 1953, Afrikaner capital, they're the junior partner in this whole arrangement around a company called Sanlam. And this is after the National Party takes power around 1948, around the ticket of Afrikaner empowerment. So they set up this company called, what is it called? 1953, I think it's called, what is it called? I forget what it's called. Okay. Wellness Corps. So they set up this company. Sanlam sets up this company, a subsidiary that's going to look into, that's going to, Afrikaner empowerment. Right. And then fast forward to 1964, Anglo, which is they decide to help them buy into a big mining company called General Mining, which later became Genco. So what happens in that? So there was what is called a fusion between English and Afrikaner capital in the 60s, and I wouldn't say the tensions melted away, but they were contained. Right. So what happens in 1994? People were scared. The white companies that the ANC is going to nationalize the commanding heights of the economy.
Yes.
And there was they were really scared, and they just didn't know what to expect from the ANC. So they went to the playbook of the 60s and they came up with Black economic empowerment.
Oh,
yeah. So they said, you know what you did with the Afrikaners? Let's do it with the Black people. So what happened in 1993, Sanlam again, which, it happened to them from Anglo. In 1993, I think, they sold 10% of their subsidiary, Methold, to a company called Methold that was led by Dr. Ntata Motlana. And it was a transaction that was 137 million rands. Now, I interviewed Dr. Motlana, the legend, many times. And the last one that stands out to me, I think the company was collapsing. And I first interviewed him above a used car dealership in Elof Street, where it was just a dream.
Right. I
remember I asked him, he was an amazing guy. He was taking calls from very important people. I'm very young. And I think it was Thabo Mbeki on the phone. He says, just give me it. I said, yeah, of course, talk to Thabo Mbeki. Then what had happened, I think the week before, they had sold their shares in MTN and they bought the Sowetan. So I asked him, Dr. Motlana, do you think this is wise? Because Sowetan is not a good newspaper.
Right.
And he says, I tell the editor, Agri-Class, this all the time.
Okay.
So I said, but what? So anyway, fast forward to the late 90s, they're now in Bryanston, and guess what? It's controlling 20 billion rands, and it's about to collapse. So there was Cyril Ramaphosa in the office. Mm-hmm. There was Dikgang Moneseneke in the office, as an awful plan office. Yes. There was Zwelakhe Sisulu. These are the directors of Nail, this company that bought. And then there was a white guy called John T. Sandler. So I asked Dr. Motlana, where's John T? Because I'd been writing stories that there's some beef between John T. and Cyril Ramaphosa, who had just arrived. He said, no, John T. is not there. But anyway, I asked Dr. Motlana, you now control an empire that is worth 20 billion rands. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I've done my homework, but Black people own 2% of this company. And what are you going to do to narrow the gap between political ownership, which is the 20 billion rands, and the economic interest in this company? Right. And he said, this is a issue that the next generation would solve, Right. And for me, I became fascinated ever since then between the substance of BE deals and the form. There's a wide, because the numbers you read, it's not the same as, what actually happens behind the scenes.
Real value.
So then there was a second transaction at Real Africa Investment. What's his name? Don Mube. He was a former Anglo employee, and he set up this company that bought 51% of African Life. Okay. Yeah. So I was at the listing of the company on the JSE. Well, the pre-listing meeting at the Johannesburg Country Club. And I reminded Don Mube recently, I met him at a book launch in Hyde Park. And I said, it was the days of PowerPoint, and he couldn't operate the PowerPoint. So the white investment bankers had to help him all the time. But anyway, so that was the second large B transaction. These are the iconic B transactions. Now, you remember I said that Anglo, the third and fourth transaction, it came out of Anglo, announced that they wanted to break up the Anglo Empire. Okay. So I was invited to the launch at Anglo in Joburg. Yeah. And I walked across, a few hundred meters from where I was working at the time, and I went to this historic announcement. And at the time, I didn't know it was historic, So Anglo announced that they're going to break up the Anglo Empire. They're going to set up a company called JCI, which is a mining company. Yes. And they're going to set up Jonic, which is an industrial company, a diversified company. And then they left the crown jewels for themselves, which is Anglo-American Platinum. Okay. So what happened then is that a consortium that was led by Cyril Ramaphosa called the National Empowerment Consortium, bought 2.6 billion rands of to buy, I think it was 35% of this company called Jonic. Yeah, and later on, fast forward, they were in downtown Johannesburg. I'm invited by Cyril Ramaphosa, he was now part of the BE Commission. Mm-hmm. So I'm invited with my colleague Andy Brown to work from the Jonic chairman's office, It was quite an experience. And we're doing now the BE Commission report. That's later on. So that's the third transaction. And then the fourth one.
Sorry, before you go into the fourth one.
Yeah.
Back in that time, where does the capital of 2 billion come from?
Well,
if you can say.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So basically, there were different fundings. Let me just quickly, I'll come back to that now.
For sure.
So, then the fourth one was, there was a bidding war between Nail and Gqubule for the fourth transaction, 2.9 billion for JCI. Okay. So, I also was at the launch of that thing I think it was at the Inanda Club in Joburg. So I was at the launch of the announcement, and I was there with Gqubule. And so there's, as I said, there's a big difference between the actual political ownership, you control the shares, and the economic ownership by the black people. Okay. So if I remember well, I'll start with the JCI one. So he overpaid 2.9 billion rands for this, So he overpaid, because there was a bidding war between the blacks, black people, apparently. So when I did the calculation at the time, I remember it was the financing came from a group of companies around Investec, and then so I'm simplifying, yeah. So but his company, African Mining Group, had 11%.
Okay.
So you'll find that even in the 11%. There's the financial institutions which have owned shares in the 11%. So all these black empowerment companies, there's banks that have got shares in the company. So the actual economic interest is far less than the 11%. So if you start with Nail, 98% of Nail, the first Mutlanes company, was owned by the institutions, the white companies.
Right.
And 2% was owned by blacks. So when he controlled 20 billion rands, he on 98% was your typical institutions. Yeah.
Yes.
And the same with all the others, So,
Isn't that where the problem starts?
That's where the problem starts, because the people who make the money, the people who make the money are the institutions. Yeah.
Also, at that time, why are you having black entrepreneurs having a bidding war? I thought the model was that you're going to
cooperate,
because there's two things you said, right? You said English capital, and then you said Afrikaner capital. That speaks to a sense of unison.
Yeah.
Whereas when you started talking about the black capital, you started talking about a bidding war.
Yes.
Why was there a bidding war? Why did they not follow, as you said, the Sanlam model?
Yeah, where they work together. Yeah. I was young, Ted, at the time. I was just watching. It is a movie, I was just watching. But you're right. We have to unite. There has to be cooperation. But as we'll talk later, there is a lot more cooperation happening now.
Yeah.
And people are conscious about the need to cooperate amongst the black companies. Okay. And then in terms of the funding, so there were a lot of opaque, like the Anglo Empire, the Oppenheimer family, they controlled the empire, but they didn't have, economic interest in it. So they set up a lot of companies in between. They were called pyramid holding companies.
Okay.
So if you're buying, let's say, Standard Bank, then you set up 5 intermediary companies between yourself and Standard Bank, and then each of them has funding.
Of course.
So that's how Nail was also funded as well, because so they had all. But later the JSC didn't allow it. So So they went to the playbook of Afrikaner and English capital, the black people.
Right.
And the financiers, that's what they were familiar with. Right. So they went to that and they said, okay, you guys try this, And that was the dilution between what I call political and economic control from day one. Yeah.
Got you. Yeah. I'm going to try to do, the reason I said I want to have a mechanical conversation is because I'm a founder, I run a startup, and there are things that you think of in a particular sense. So let me phrase, and sometimes I'll look at my notes because I want to be careful to speak to the intent of the conversation.
Yes.
So if BE was a startup, what is the core problem that it solves?
Okay, the ANC went to the elections in 1994 with a manifesto called the Reconstruction Development Program.
Right.
And they said they want to deracialize the commanding heights of the economy.
Okay.
So that, in a nutshell, is what they're trying to do.
Okay.
So the ownership of the commanding heights of the economy must be deracialized. You can't, and I listened to a podcast recently by Saki Makozoma. You're saying that you couldn't have an economy where the black people have the politics, own the politics, and then the white people still continue to own the economy. It's not sustainable in the long term. So we have to diversify ownership of the economy. That was the objective of it. And obviously, beyond that, you have to diversify the boards, the top management. You have to diversify, as the policy pillars were later erected, you have to diversify, procurement and things like that. So those.
Excuse my curiosity. The conversation you're referencing, is that a conversation that was had now?
Yeah, recently. Yeah. Okay. He was recalling what happened back in the day and why they came up with this BE policy. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Can the same still be said now?
Yes, the same can be said. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I struggle with that.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. If you run the state, if you and I run the state, the state. We run the country. We run government. We run treasury. We have access to treasury. We run policy. We run procurement, and we manage it. Can we still say that the economy does not belong to us?
Well, the companies do not belong to us. So now, 2 years ago, I did a big deep dive into the ownership on the JSE.
True.
So I did a deep dive. I looked at JSE Top 50, and I'm doing an update now for 2024, but this is for 2022. So what I found is that there were 1,000 transactions BE of about worth 668 billion rands. Yes, from 1996 to 2002. So if you look at the black ownership that came out of that, so it was about 228 billion rands, and it was about equal to 1.2% of the market cap of the JSE at the end of 2022. But people need to understand that the majority of the JSE has got very little to do with the South African economy. So I came up with a methodology to calculate the value of South African assets using the annual reports of all these companies here. So 78% of the assets on the JSE have got nothing to do with South African economy. So because BE is for South African assets, the black ownership was 5.8%.
Right.
Of the JSE. So the majority of the JSE, the black ownership is only 5.8%. And what I also found, which is quite interesting, is that 74% of that ownership was in two sectors,
right,
mining and finance. Now, then if you look at the structure of the economy from 1996 to 2022, which I also compared, there's only two sectors of the economy that grew.
Right.
From what they were then. It's mining and finance.
Right.
So the performance, everything else did not grow. Manufacturing collapsed. Manufacturing was the largest sector of the economy and collapsed. So the benefits from BE mirrored what happened in those
basic.
The structure of the economy from 1996 to 2002. So when you unpack the 228 billion rands black ownership, the biggest myth, Ted, is that it went to the politically connected. That is not true. I know this thing. I stay out of the politics. The initial deals went to the politically connected. Dr. Mutlana was Nelson Mandela's physician.
Right.
He was politically connected, and some of the deals went to Cyril Ramaphosa, Tokyo Sehwale. I met him recently.
Sure.
Yeah, and but it is no longer the case. The overwhelming majority of that 228 billion is broad-based empowerment schemes that include workers and include communities.
Right.
So someone must explain to me what is wrong with giving shares to employees and workers. It makes no sense. What I also found out is that there's now a super league of about 30 companies, as I was telling you before.
Yes.
These are large I was doing this work for Kagiso Trust, Kagiso Capital, yeah. There's about 30 black companies which have got what I call the super league of black companies. They've got assets of more than $1 billion. So if you start at the top, there's a company called Seriti Resources. I estimate that it's worth about 60 billion rands. And this is not a political company. It is run by Mark Teke, who I interviewed, I think a year ago at his office. The Tebe investment has got some political involvement through the ANC, but the vast majority of the shares of Seriti Resources are owned by black companies. And I must just tell you the amazing story I heard about this thing. It was cooperation between the 4 black shareholders, and so they created Seriti Resources, the second one is Royal Bafokeng Holdings, which is the Bafokeng Nation. Their investment company has assets of about 56 billion. So no politicians there. And then the third one, I think, is the Motsepe family interests in Sanlam and African Rainbow Minerals. Whatever people will say, I've studied that company. It is not, Patrice's Motsepe's involvement in mining it preceded the BE policies or the mining charter. He entered the industry long before there were these policies. What we should remember is that for the first decade of this empowerment in the 90s, there was no official government policy. So everybody was doing as they please. So Patrice Motsepe came in 1998 during that environment, and he set up African Rainbow Minerals. So what I can say is that, so there are now these large companies. Some of them are worth more than 10 billion and others are worth less than 2. And then the Mine Workers Investment Company, I was at their conference recently, it's got about assets of 9 billion rands. The Mine Workers Investment Company. Kagiso Trust, Kagiso Group as well. I think it's about 7-8 billion. Tebe is about 7-8 billion. So we've got large companies that we've created out of this BE. Despite all we didn't fundamentally transform the structure of the inherited apartheid economy, but we did create these large black companies. So the question now is, as you were saying, how can these companies cooperate? And I was listening to a recent statement by the ANC, and they said, BE is under attack. You guys must defend BE. You are the beneficiaries, And I think there's some merit to what the ANC was saying about that.
I hear you.
And so it's not true that the politically connected. I have, as you said, the receipts. I go through all these structures. It's a tedious job. It takes a lot of time, and I have to repeat, it is not true that it's politically connected.
That is not only politically.
No, there's very little politicians in that black ownership on the JSE.
Specifically on the JSE.
On the JSE, Okay. And you must remember the top 50 that I was looking at, it accounts for 93% of the market cap of the JSE.
Right. So you said of the 668, about 200 odd, which is about a third, sits in black owned.
But you must remember that the deals was worth 668 billion rand.
For sure.
But they happened at different times. And you must remember that also those 4, iconic transactions, they're all unraveled without the ones I was talking about earlier, without transferring any ownership to black people. Very little went to black people because they didn't work, So there's a big gulf between the headline numbers you see and the real ownership on the JSE. And I just have to mention that,
Please proceed.
No, I was just saying, so there's a lot of fake statistics on black ownership. And there's a voodoo system of measuring black ownership that the government allows. You might have seen recently Solidarity and the Free Market Foundation. They said, there's a professor from Wits who said that 1 trillion rands had been given to 100 politically connected individuals. Does he provide the receipts? No, he just says so. He says that he believes that 100. So I've done analysis of all these structures, and that is not true, because if you just do a sense check of that, the 1 trillion given to 100 people, so it means that each of them got 10 trillion. like it just makes
It
doesn't make sense. Like no.
say the
And these are individuals, the maths are not mathing,
Right.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, so that's number one. And then solidarity comes and they say, no, 1 to 2 trillion was transferred to black people, but there's no evidence that 1 to 2 trillion, and they say there's 30% black ownership. Now, if you do 30% black ownership times 20 trillion, which is the market cap of the JSE, it is 6 trillion rands.
Yeah.
So black people do not own 6 trillion of the JSE. And then the Black Empowerment Commission as well comes to a similar number because they're not measuring ownership. So my methodology measures ownership as reported by the company in their annual report. Now, there's a huge juncture between what they record, what they measure in their annual reports, and what is on their B certificates. I'll just give you a couple of examples. Nedbank, 0.5% black ownership in the 2024 annual report. How much black ownership on the scorecard? 36.6%. Standard Bank, 0.5% black ownership in their annual report. And they haven't done a B deal since 2014. Nedbank hasn't done one since 2015. How much black ownership? It's 29.6% on their certificate. Pick n Pay, one of the least transformed companies in South Africa, it has never done a B deal.
Okay.
They've got 22% black ownership. Yeah. So we've got a manga system of measuring black ownership that is sanctioned by the government.
Okay.
And in the review of empowerment, we have to address this issue. Yeah.
Thank you. Duma is trying to get us shot. Anyway, so I'm joking. Is it your view then that is the JSE a reflection of the economy?
People ask me that question, and then I say to them, I did a study for the Black Business Council, and I said, Kanti, what country do you live in? It was about ownership. President Ramaphosa goes in the State of the Nation address and says black people own 38% of the JSE. Nada, I know this stuff. It's not true, yeah. So I just went and did this investigation for the Black Business Council, and I went and checked where he got that number from. The number came from the Minerals Council. And then you go and you look at the mines. So you have to go and look. Now, platinum, there are no small platinum countries. So all of them, there's a big 3 or a big 4 that own 90 to 100% of resources. So start with iron ore. There's 2 companies that own everything.
Yes.
And then you go to platinum. I think it's 3 companies. It's like Amplat, it's Impala, and then there's a Northam, and then I think there's another one. They own 90%, the same with gold. You see, there's Harmony, there's Goldfields, and so forth. And then they own the majority of the gold industry. So you can go through every single commodity. There are no small companies. Yeah. Then you go to retail. We have big retailers. So that inherited, South Africa had one of the highest levels of concentration of the economy in 1994, and the situation hasn't changed. Good. We have a highly concentrated economy. And so retail, the banks, the top 5 own, is it 90% of the assets? There are no small banks. There are no diversification of ownership in the banks. I'm not saying it's a perfect metric. I'm saying that in this, it's a proxy for black ownership in the economy.
Yeah. The next thing I'm going to ask you is, what is the actual unit of empowerment? So in startup land, we talk about for instance, the customer acquisition cost, all right, versus the lifetime value of that customer. So I spend 30 Rand to acquire the customer. That customer spends in my fiscal year 500 Rand, right? So there I calculate my margin. My question is, when you're looking at how BE is structured, what is the actual unit of empowerment? And by this, I mean, is it jobs? Is it black-owned enterprises? Is it black-owned revenue? Is it asset ownership? Or is it something else?
Okay, so we now have what I call a social accounting system that is unique in the world, and it's a scorecard that measures black economic empowerment.
Yes.
So it's got 5 elements. It's got ownership, It's got management control.
Yes.
It's got
skills development.
It's got management control, skills development,
and then
enterprise and supply development, and socioeconomic development. Now, it's difficult to get data on all of them. So let's start with ownership, which is what we're talking about, and then employment equity. I just want to talk a little bit about that because each time there's a new president at the BMF, I do analysis for them. Now, for the past 2009 to 2014, Black ownership, African representation in top management in the private sector increased from 12.6 to 40.5%, the equivalent of standing still. But Black, African, colored, Indian increased to 30%, but the overwhelming majority of that increase was the employment of South Africans of Indian descent.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm big on unity within the Black groups.
Gotcha.
But this is what happened, And then white males, 3.5% of the population, it's about 51% of top management.
Right.
And white males and females, that's about 64%. So in terms of top management and management structures, we have a white-owned economy, we have a white-managed economy, and so let's also go. Now, on skills, it's very difficult to find aggregated statistics.
Right.
And in my work on the transformation fund, I tried to collect statistics on enterprise and supply development. It's about the last few years, about 13 billion rands. And in terms of enterprise and supply, it's less than people thought, less than a lot of people thought. I got those stats from the B Commission, but a lot of it is not cash to the Black entrepreneurs. It's financial and non-financial support that is given to Black companies. So, that's it. Now back to ownership.
Yes.
So ownership, it depends where you are in the economy. If you're in the JSE, there's a metric. It's the market capitalization of the company. And then typically in the past, there would be a discount, like that is given to the Black shareholders, like 10%, 15%, a discount. So that is the metric that's used. So typically they would set up a special purpose vehicle to own the shares in the company. And the share price appreciation must be higher than the cost of capital and the dividend payout. Right. So there's a big difference between the dividend yield, I think on the JSE, I haven't looked, it's between 2 and 3%, And then the cost of capital, it's a huge amount.
Right.
And we've got,
even if you just take prime.
Prime plus, we've got amongst the highest interest rates. And so then there's also the performance of the shares on the JSE. So typically when you now reach the end of your funding period, you have to now distribute.
Right.
So you have to pay the bankers the money they loaned you. So the money can come from third-party financiers. This is your banks. It can come from the company, vendor. It's called vendor financing. So if Anglo is selling shares to you, they can create a notional loan, which they give to you, and then you must pay it over time. Yes. So you have to settle all those things, over time. And so I've also looked at the most successful BE transactions of all time, and I think there's about 4 that I look at. The first round.
I'm sorry, before you get there, I wanted to ask you that in this scorecard that you've just defined, which one of those has the highest economic multiplier? Like, what's the most important?
Okay, the one that's got the highest points is enterprise and supply development. So preferential procurement has got 25 points, and enterprise development and supply development has got 15 points. Yeah. Okay. So
does it have the highest economic multiplier?
It probably,
and I'm talking like real.
There hasn't been studies on that, but I would imagine that they have the highest economic multiplier because if you're giving procurements to Black-owned companies, it benefits to many Black companies. It benefits more people. And if you're investing in SMEs, it benefits more people. Okay. And also some of the community initiatives, they have got a huge multiplier effect. But there hasn't been any study that looks at the economic multiplier and the economic impact. So I'm just based on my knowledge of these things. But in terms of the ownership, there is a lot of broad-based ownership schemes.
Okay. I
and
imagine,
community schemes. Yeah.
I imagine that when you were talking about the distribution, you were trying to explain where the value leaks on these deals.
Yeah,
Okay.
The value. So the value leaks. It goes to the funders.
Yes.
It goes to the companies that actually, provided the vendor finance, and it goes to, and then the banks in the early days, they would take.
And the end beneficiary doesn't really.
Yes, he gets a fraction of what he is. So so in the early days, they would take prime plus 50% of the upside.
Yes.
But now that has not happened. It's much lower, the cost of capital. So in the early days, the cost of capital was obscene, and it has gone down now, but it's still very high. Yeah.
Okay. There's something you said about the black ownership of the top 50 JSE firms is closer to 1% after stripping out what you call accounting smoke,
Yes.
or something like that. Can you walk us through what the biggest sort of blackwashing tricks are?
I like
if
it.
you call that.
Yes,
if I can call it that.
So the blackwashing tricks, I'll explain what it's about, the rules, and I'll explain that I once worked for Telkom doing their advisor on the B. Okay. The Elephant Consortium had 6% ownership that they bought. And then we had to find a way to maximize the points for Telkom. We went to, I'm not proud of this, we went to verification agency 1.
Okay.
And we didn't agree with their methodology. Then we went to verification agency 2, and we agreed with their methodology. So what they allow you to do, there's a bizarre rule where you can strip out ownership by what is called mandated investments, which is your pension and provident funds, up to 15%.
Okay.
You strip it out of the denominator. Okay. And then number 2, you can also strip out state ownership. At the time, the government owned, I think, close to 40% of Telkom. So you could strip out, so it's 100% shares issued, and then you strip out pension and provident funds, 40, and then you strip out government. So the denominator...
That's another 40.
Yeah, it's another 40. So the denominator is now 20.
Jeez.
So it's 6 over 20. So we got them to something like 28 or 30% ownership. So these are the kind of manga people who are paid to do this. Now, I can go on and on.
For sure.
So there are many of these tricks. Companies have found ways to game this system and maximize the points they get for ownership. So, yeah.
Okay.
Let me give you another one.
Yes.
The one that is the most shocking one. It's called the once empowered, always empowered.
Yes.
Now,
that's the mining.
So basically, I'll use an extreme one. Patrice bought the mines in 1998 at African Rainbow Minerals, when he formed Arm Gold. And in fact, let's say that he bought the mines in 2002, the second transaction. They can still count it now as if it was still...
as if it's a fresh flow.
Yeah.
So this is the reason there's no fresh flow.
There's no fresh flow, and that's very important. And that is the most important thing. So now they can still count it, and so Zodwa Ntul, the previous BE commissioner, she said it's the equivalent of you have a board of 10 black people, and 4 of them a board of 10, and 4 are black, and then the 4 leave the board, and then replaced by whites, and so there's now 10 white people,
right.
But you continue to count the 4 black people who left
that
the
were
board.
once on the board.
That were once on the board. So it's a bizarre system that we have to, in terms of the review of the codes, we have to get rid of this.
What was the logic?
It was bullying by the mines, let's be honest, yeah.
Okay.
And then in what you call it, so in finance as well, there's no incentive for you to replacement BE transactions. So let's just take these transactions in the banks. I think the first round one expired. Most of them expired around 2015. So they can keep the points, most of the points, under certain rules. So the incentives to do another transaction are weak. So as you're saying, the flow of new transactions, you need liquidity to keep the system going. So that what you have is a few companies that are genuinely committed to the process, I'm talking about companies like Sanlam, which is done under Motsepe's ownership. They've done multiple deals.
Okay.
Companies like, I think Vodacom, MTN, they've done multiple deals. MultiChoice has done multiple deals. So many companies that are genuinely committed to this process. Exara's, I think, is on its third transaction. Okay. So some companies are committed to the process. They will do it despite that the law doesn't require it. Yeah.
These debt-funded VE deals.
Yeah.
Are you saying that structure doesn't work? And if not,
okay. If you look at I was talking about the ones that worked. So I believe that the most successful of all time was First Rand. It created about almost 24 billion rands for black shareholders. And it created large black companies like Women's Development Bank, Kagiso Trust, and I think, those black companies. Now, what was unique about that one is that there was a free carry. And these are free shares that were given to them.
Okay.
And then Mahala, that reduced the average cost of capital. And because First Rand is providing most of the financing of its balance sheet, there was also a lower cost of capital. So
but there were covenants and all sorts of
But then the thing is, the share price did very well. It was a well-run company, but what you extracted at the end was 24 billion rands for black shareholders. But I do think that we have to talk about, and there was a discount as well. So there's a discount and a free carry. So those are some of the things that we should institutionalize into these structures going forward. Yeah.
Okay. How do you find this balance between what we call transformation versus new formations? And I'll tell you why I'm asking the question. I don't think we can expect that a minimal amount of white-owned companies can adequately satisfy the needs of the rest of the economy. I don't know if that's a fair statement or not.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. We have to set up new companies. You're an entrepreneur. You want to entrepreneurship.
Never mind new companies, new industries, new structures versus this expectation that these 40 companies must
on the JSE.
Must 100%. Be transformed for the 60 billion.
Yeah. But now let's look
at that. Feels like a misnomer.
Okay, when I phone the JSE now and again, I've got like JSE 1994, JSE now.
Okay.
It's not that different. All that's happened is that there were separately listed mining companies, which have now been consolidated around a few mining companies. Yeah. And if you look at what's new on the JSE, it's maybe on the banks, it's Capitec. There's Discovery, the collapse of private healthcare, of public healthcare, Discovery. And then you've got companies like MTN, these are new industries, and Vodacom. These are new industries that the government set up where you can put in empowerment conditions.
Wait, are you saying Discovery is a new industry?
No, I'm talking about you remember the government provides a license, the telco license.
Yes.
For MTN and Vodacom. Yes. So you can set up empowerment conditions for new industries, whether it's telcos or casinos or whatever. Yeah. So these are the new industries that came in post 1994. But the structure, more or less, when I look at the two Excel spreadsheets, if you look at it's barely changed the structure of this economy. And that's what we mean, that it is still highly concentrated. Somebody must do that study and find out so when I look at 96 and 2002, what grew? It was mining and finance. Everything else didn't grow. But within the other sectors of the economy, obviously something is growing, and you have to get black people involved in those new things. And for example, we're now seeing renewable energy. I would like someone to fund a study. I would love to look into this because I can smell a scam there.
Renewables.
Yeah, renewables. I don't believe that there's genuine empowerment. There's supposed to be community empowerment so it's an invite to some people to finance me to look into these renewables. All the IPPs it will take 6 months. Yeah. But I'm just saying that I smell a scam, and I don't think there's been genuine empowerment that hasn't been achieved, but I don't have the evidence. But I can, I've been following these things.
Your intuition is telling
My intuitions tell me that have the people in the Northern Cape benefited? from these renewable industries. This is a new industry like you're talking about,
The solar farms and all.
Solar farms. And why didn't the government, they're the only buyer of this renewable.
Right.
Why don't they take a free carry for themselves and set up a state renewable company, a state renewable company that keeps these 15 or 20% stakes for free?
Right.
Because you're the only buyer. You can do whatever you want. So why don't you put a 20% free carry for the government in all of these transactions? It makes no sense for me. Yeah.
What does that do? What does the 20%?
Well, you must remember that it's a 20% of like in mining, in renewables, non-renewable, and many countries, they put in place a free carry for the state.
Right.
Yeah. So,
but the state still takes taxes on top of the free carry?
They take, like in Botswana, I did the analysis of Botswana. The state
takes
with De Beers, they take 85%, 86%, The Botswana, when you talk about royalties, state ownership, everything, it's about 86%, that the government takes. And then De Beers takes about 14%.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say, we are setting up a new industry. I don't know how much all these renewable companies are worth, but the government could be owning 10% or 20% of these new renewable energy companies.
Yeah.
So, and then black ownership on top. So you have different layers. You could have state ownership, let's say 10%. You could have well, it doesn't create much employees.
Right.
Communities owning another bit and your black shareholders owning more. Yeah. And you create genuine empowerment through this new industry. But we haven't done that. Yeah.
Let's talk about how entrepreneurs, small to medium enterprises can really make this work on the ground, if at all.
Okay.
The question I want to ask you, quickly, is if you had to pick one for the next 5 years, skills versus equity, what would be the biggest driver of GDP growth between those two things?
Do you know, when we created most of the values that I'm talking about, the 220, the economy was growing between 2003 and 2008 by 4.5% a year.
Yes.
It lifts, it includes it includes the performance of these shares on the JSE, Right. And some of them increased very high share prices. Yeah. So the question is again?
I was trying to
skills versus
So for the next 5 years, what will drive GDP?
Okay. Number one, if you had to put a gun on my head, we've got massive problems in South Africa, and I don't like, single solutions for massive problems. I believe in, you need to have multiple tools to address the multiple problems. And, I'm a big believer, as I was telling you, in universal basic income.
Right.
But the thing is, if you had to put my gun to my head, Ted, if you look at any random African country that is growing at more than 5 to 6%, which is many of them, what are they doing? I go and look at their investment rate. And the investment rate is usually they have a high investment rate, 25, 30 and more in Tanzania. So if you had to put a gun to my head, we must invest in infrastructure. Number one, we must increase the investment in infrastructure, physical capital. And what I don't understand is why has the government...
The ability to build infrastructure.
So
that's skills.
No, not this. So I'm talking about the money now before I get to the skills.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So this is the physical capital.
Okay.
So the physical capital, we have to do huge investments, and South Africans don't understand the scale of the investments we have to create to meet the unmet needs of our population.
Right.
So, so we have to invest in a lot of things, like when I talk to the Department of Education, the school's backlog alone is 200 billion. Talk to the Department of Health, the backlog for health alone is 200 billion rands, infrastructure only. And I'm talking about people.
Right.
Yeah, so that's number one. So we have to invest heavily in infrastructure as a country because we've got one of the lowest investment rates. It's about 15%, 15% of GDP. We have to double that from 15% to GDP to 30% of GDP. And the thing I can't understand is that over the past 10 years, the government real per capita public investment has collapsed by 40%. And that coincides with the collapse of GDP growth to 0.8% over the same period. So we have to do that. Number two.
How do we double it? Domestic investment?
Mostly. So if you look at a random country, how do they finance investment? 90% domestic and 10%
FDI.
for FDI. So FDI is the icing on the cake. So that's number one. Number two, education.
Right.
And skills, So, I'm a big believer that we should have free education as a human right.
Right.
We must have free education from basic to tertiary. I believe in the cause of the fees must fall. And I believe that there's the postponed objectives of fees must fall. I did a calculation recently. To provide free tertiary would be another 50 billion rands. And so we have to expand. So just to give you an idea about what we're talking about, our tertiary enrollment rate is about 27%. In some countries, like in South America, I don't have it's close to 100%. Like in tertiary enrollment rate.
Okay.
In
like what, Brazil, Argentina?
Yeah, I think it's Chile, Argentina.
Okay.
It's above 90%, close to 100. Yeah.
Okay.
The most educated countries in the world, it's US, Canada, and Norway. So if we have to move towards that situation, I believe we must educate the whole population. We have to expand this education, let's say the tertiary education.
Right.
So I think we'll probably have to double the size of the tertiary education sector.
Okay.
We've got currently enrollment of about 1.6 million tertiary and TVET. We'd probably have to double that.
Yeah.
And I'll just quickly talk about this, is that one of the successes of this country over the past 15 years is that the number of people who the bachelor pass rates have increased substantially. I don't have the number now, but it went to about 300,000. It's almost trebled since 2009. It's about trebled from 100 to about 300, roughly. And this last year, the first year intake was about 200,000. So there's theoretically about 100,000 people who didn't get into universities. Exactly. We can't allow that to continue. So we have to expand the education, the tertiary education. Yeah. So I believe that I hate this word, but it's called human. The economists call it human capital.
Yes.
I prefer to talk about human development. Because I don't want to commodify
people.
Yeah, people and human. So we have to invest in human development and infrastructure, and this is what creates a country.
Yeah.
If you have to simplify what economic development about, it's these two tracks. Yeah, human development, which is what I'm talking about: education, health, social security for people, and number two, physical capital. So that's what we have to do. Yeah.
How much of the continent have you traveled? Have you traveled with that?
Well, yes, quite a few countries.
Yeah. What is one of the first things you look out for when you?
Is the investment rate. Yeah, investment rate. Like if you go to Ethiopia, I follow that country very closely. There's a miracle that's been happening in Ethiopia. Close to double-digit growth for 2 decades. Yeah.
I mean, though, at the most intuitive, primal.
At the most intuitive.
I'll give you an example. Yeah. Maybe let me just say, I people watch a lot. So whenever I go to a country, you go to the UAE, you cannot stop seeing cranes. Like it's just the whole.
Yeah. That's in Addis. That's in Addis Ababa. You see cranes. Yeah.
The second thing that I generally look out for is the rate of young people loitering. I don't know if you've ever noticed that.
Yes.
And you're starting to see that increase very significantly in South Africa.
Yes, I do. We've got a youth unemployment rate of 71.7%. That is untenable. We've got the second highest youth unemployment rate in the world after Djibouti. And I work for an organization called Youth Capital, And we do the youth unemployment numbers all the time. And there's 7.2 million young people who are unemployed. There's 9 million who are not in education, employment, or training. That's the seeds of a revolution, Yeah.
Very much so.
And but anyway, so empowerment, empowerment, I believe in the broad-based definition of empowerment. It's about building human development. It's about, people must have opportunities to participate in the economy as employees, as owners of businesses, and through procurement and so forth. Yeah.
Tell me, what is the most undervalued lever in the codes right now?
The most undervalued
lever in the BE codes, and I think there's stuff like absorption targets, artisanal training.
The one that I really want to
export-oriented SMEs.
Yeah. Okay, I would want to see one. I think procurement can be the big lever, but we don't have good enough data to be able to see what is happening. We have to create opportunities for Black companies in these value chains. You can't have a situation where Black entrepreneurs, most of them, look to the government for, it's not sustainable. And you've seen a lot of, media coverage of the corruption in the government. People must have another outlet in the private sector. And when I look at the annual reports of the companies, there are some companies that are doing very well on preferential procurement. But I would say we almost need like a procurement challenge of the top 100 companies on the JSE.
But isn't that the problem?
Yeah.
Isn't the problem the fact that we've broken the very thing that is meant to empower
the state?
Yeah. Because no one procures more than the state.
The state, yeah.
And so if you're procuring on an annual basis 312 billion worth of goods and services, that is where, and this whole disconnect that we are creating as if it's wrong for SMEs to do business with the state, I think is problematic because where you're going to grow your business is having a state machine that works and supports.
You were telling about finance before I forget. I'm big on finance as well.
Right.
So if you look at the banks, according to Basel statistics, their total balance sheet exposure to Black SMEs, the reporting required by the Financial Sector Charter is 14 billion rands.
Okay.
That is about 0.45% of their total assets.
Okay.
I believe that we're dealing with racial profiling of Black SMEs, because this is cumulative lending to Black SMEs.
Right.
And I discovered once when I was speaking at the BASA conference and I called it out, it includes your West Bank loans, which can't be right, your car.
For a car.
Yeah, for your car, yeah. So, and then the second one that shocked me, when I was doing my research for the Transformation Fund, Nedbank. What did they lend last year to Black SMEs? 200 million rands.
200 million rands.
Yeah. And what did ABSA lend? 200 million rands. This is 0.00 something percent of their total lending.
To total lending.
Total lending, yeah, to Black SMEs. So they're the only two that disclosed it. The other three didn't disclose. So what I'm trying to say is that to get the system working, I believe we need a procurement challenge for the top companies. And they must disclose their procurement in detail according to the way that we will all agree on, and say that if we're at 10% or 20% now, we're going to double it to 50% or whatever. Right. And then on the other side, we must have a system to provide the financing to the Black companies. And I believe that the time has come for, the banks are used to reporting on Black SME finance and their targets in the Financial Sector Charter, but we need to set up more targets that are higher for them to lend to Black SMEs.
With that stat, you've walked me into the next point, which I was going to make, is capital scarcity.
Yes.
So those are private entities. And so they are managing.
And then the government. So that's a very good question. So when I was doing the study, so if you look at there's two financing gaps.
Right.
So the B financing gap, I calculated based on that thing, is about, what is it? It's about 300, it's about 300, it's more than 300, it's more than 300 billion rands. I can't remember what the number is, And then if you add the SMME one, it's 350. So the financing gap combined is about 700 billion rands.
Right.
So we have to get a whole system that provides funding to make those things happen. So in a normal country, it starts with the central bank. So the central bank must be able to provide, I believe, 3 windows for the banks to lend. They did it during COVID, by the way, but it didn't succeed, the loan guarantee scheme. So I would like to see 3 facilities, one for the banks to provide B financing. That's the first window, the developmental window, and some kind of guarantee scheme from the central bank. The second one is to provide SMMEs. Because when I added
Can you say more about, because I was going to ask you, you're very brilliant, because I've never seen someone get 3 questions ahead in a single answer. I was going to ask you about the credit guarantee against this whole capital scarcity problem.
Yes.
Because the reason the private banks are not lending to Black businesses is because Black businesses
don't have the collateral,
apart from the fact that they don't have, they're seen as high risk.
Yes.
Right. So before you succeed, you're going to fail a couple of times.
Yeah.
They're not willing to pay that school fees.
Yes.
What does a credit guarantee?
Well, we provided a guarantee from the central bank during the COVID year.
Right.
So they did provide, but it didn't succeed.
But they killed us on the interest anyway.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But I'm just saying that if you get everybody working, there's credit guarantees. The executive director of I was talking to someone from the CFA,
right.
SEDFA, sorry.
Yes.
And he was telling me that we must look into the Brazilian one, Brazilian's national, it's called the BNDES. Okay. So they have a system where they have a credit guarantee for SMEs,
Right.
And so we have to get the funding windows for SMEs, because I was in China some time ago. I've been there a couple of times.
Yeah.
And it's monopolized by large companies. Mm. And when I was there, I think the second time, they introduced a scheme, a funding window through the People's Bank of China to the banks to lend to small business. So the cost of capital must be lower than it is now.
Right.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. So then we must look at credit guarantees as well to stimulate the thing. And then the last one is your microfinance, and that is where SEDFA works. So we must segment the market according to the B transactions, the big ones on the JSE, and then we must small and medium, which is the IDC, the National Empowerment Fund, and then the micro, which is the SEDFA.
Right.
Yeah, Small Enterprise Development, whatever it's called. It merged with, it's got a new name, yeah. So we must create these three funding windows. And I've been arguing that we need to our spending from the state is inadequate, and we need to increase it to about 1% of GDP, which is 1.5% of GDP. Sorry, 1% for black SMEs, yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Is it inadequate or just mismanaged?
It's inadequate. Yeah, it's complete.
So the number is not even.
Okay, so let me give you the number. So CFA is 2 billion,
right,
that they disperse to about 70,000 businesses, roughly. Mm-hmm. The National Empowerment Fund is 800 million.
Okay.
So you can't tell me that is enough. So remember, this one deals with the micro, and 800 million rands is for small and medium enterprises. That is completely inadequate for all the. So the government must put more money into this pot, and then the banks must also put more money into the pot. So we must have a unified reporting system, almost like an annual. You have it. It's called in the OECD countries. It's called the OECD SME Finance Scoreboard. Okay. So and it measures the contribution of the whole system towards providing finance for SMEs. So we need that's one of the recommendations that came out of my report for the government, that we have to have a monitoring system so that we must know at any time how much is the system providing to SMEs. And then we must also have some procurement challenge, because there's no point giving someone the loan if there is not a market. So it must provide access to capital and access to market. And our economy is not growing.
Right.
So we can't create SMEs when the economy is not growing. So it must also be supported by a supportive macroeconomic policy that's going to start growing.
That's the infrastructure thing.
The infrastructure, the spending on education, and so forth. Yeah.
So are we measuring the wrong thing? And I made a note on it because when you were talking about it, if the KPI was the median black household net worth rather than corporate scorecards, would be...
That's a very one. I'm going to start working on that. So the one that economists look at first is GDP per capita.
Right.
So our GDP per capita in 2024 was lower than it was in 2007.
Okay.
So that's GDP divided by the population. Okay. So our economy has not been growing in line with the population. And then we must look at, I will come back to you with a measure of wealth.
Okay.
And we have, but it's difficult. We have high levels of inequality. I think 10% of people, I think it's 90% of wealth. So, but we must be able to disaggregate the wealth statistics according to race, because we currently do have household spend. I think we have some of the income statistics according to race, but I haven't seen the wealth statistics according to race, because how does the ordinary person accumulate it's through housing, it's through land ownership, it's through,
asset based.
It's asset based, yeah. So we should be able, and your car and whatever. So we should be able to provide, because there's a GDP per capita, there's incomes, and then we need to develop a metric of wealth, which I agree with you. And that one is the one that drives, that's how we're going to monitor in more detail inequality.
Yes.
That's how we're going to maybe implement a wealth tax. And we must know exactly what's happening on the wealth statistics, because the problem is that we don't exactly know what is happening.
Thank you for that. The next section I want to get to is let's make the counter argument for corporates. All right. So corporates, in second year finance, we are taught WACC. So, the weighted average cost of capital, et cetera, et cetera. And I wanted to ask you a few things around that. So number one is a sort of return on ratings. Okay. So if a mid-sized construction firm moves from a level 6 to a level 1, what's the realistic revenue uplift, for example?
There were studies in the early days of empowerment that looked precisely at that, but I haven't followed the literature recently. When I was doing this research for the ESD on the transformation fund, I went to the annual reports of the banks. So the one that struck me was Standard Bank's one. Okay. So you look at what Standard Bank is doing on ESD. I kid you not, they're doing exactly the same in all the African countries. They're the biggest bank in Africa.
Yes, from Stanbic and...
Yeah. But all these ESD they're doing in South Africa, and these are the people who say we must scrap BE. They must tell me how... But Standard Bank is doing the same in every single African country.
Right.
Yeah, that they're involved in. So it makes business sense for you to try, oil the community in which you are operating in. So whatever they're doing here, they're doing in other African countries.
Sorry, what are they doing? I'm
talking about enterprise and investing in SMEs and creating different. The model is different in each country, but they're doing massive investment. So people are saying ESD is a cost in our in our economy, but they're doing the same without the same policies in other African countries. Yeah.
If you could rewrite the ownership element, what clauses would you add to guarantee real economic control?
I would. There would be the measurement. Mm-hmm. There would be a. You'd have to do a new transaction after 3 years or 4 years, and so if you as Standard Bank, the transaction winds up, you'd be given 3-4 years to do a new one. So your ownership score would decline on a sliding scale. So that would create more liquidity in the system.
Forgive the interruption. When you say transaction wind up, there's no longer a black owner after that?
Yes, because generally you have to sell your shares to realize value. And so after 10 years, the typical deal, or 5 years, 10 years.
Okay.
So once the black shareholder is sold, you should have like a 3 or 4 year adjustment period, and you continue to get points according to a sliding scale. Okay. And that creates more liquidity in the market. Yeah. So that's the first thing.
The new deal flow.
Yeah, the new deal flow. And then the second thing we have to do is to measure actual ownership. So the scorecard must measure actual ownership as reported by the company at the back of its annual report. Yeah.
I like that very much, actually. And so my next question is, and I was thinking about this, you've sort of answered it when you're talking about the credit guarantee, but I think this might have a different context, is that should the state take on a sort of buy down or a first loss?
That's also what came out of the research that I was doing.
Okay.
So it's a credit guarantee, it's a first loss, so that incentivizes the lending that's going to happen. And I must say that
So you're for it?
Yeah, I'm for it. Yeah. Everybody I talked to when I was doing the research, they said there must be a first loss.
Yeah.
But they couldn't give me an exact percentage what the first loss is.
Yeah, because the fiscal cost versus the social benefit.
Yeah. So I couldn't come up with a definitive number. And I remember I had a meeting about 3 weeks ago with Zazi Capital in Tamela.
Okay.
And they said maybe it could start at 50% and be a sliding scale, because I think the risk is higher in the first year. You know this better than me. It's higher in the first year. And I don't know how it works, but what I discovered during this research as well is that there's an ecosystem of a lot of Black companies that have got expertise in this. So I would hope that this transformation fund, you know, in the first step, it must create, you know, work for that first level of transfer, you know, these Black companies.
Yes.
And then number two is the people who will be funded through these transactions. Yeah. So I think we must diversify. You know, people have got different areas of expertise, you know, these companies. So we must be able to provide, like you as Ted, you tell me about Trade Collective, you do trade invoicing. So why can't a portion of this 100 billion rand go to Trade Collective?
I've been telling them.
No, I'm just saying, no, but you've got me. I've got this foot in the door.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So some of it can go to that, but not all of it. And then another guy specializes in another field of finance, you know. But you must have a proper understanding of the ecosystem. That's why I've been going around now to meet these Black companies that I didn't know about, you know, and I've just learned about your company just now, and I just think so. I will,
What is your? I heard you say earlier, which is something I really appreciate, and it's something I think my generation also appreciates. This, I think every country needs a dashboard. Where anyone can see exactly what's going on. Like you're at home or in your business, every morning you log on and you see what your dashboard is doing.
Do you know the one like procurement and corruption? Why don't we have a dashboard that you can see what's happening in every government department? I used to, in a previous life, be an expert on mining, and so. In Norway, there's a dashboard. You can see the ownership of every oil field in Norway. You go into the dashboard and you say, and they've got numbers as opposed to names. So oil field 6712.
Yes.
It's Ted's company.
And like you can click and then you see.
Click and then you see, So why can't we? So what I find amazing is that we would have, they discover the corruption let's say today. And then, no, sorry. You get the contract today, then they discover the corruption 5 years later. And then, you know what I'm saying? Why don't we know in real time? So if you lost the tender, it must be there. And why
we deal with it immediately. We don't
deal with it. So I don't know. I've been asking people because people say, Duma, okay, we agree with you. But now this government, But I'm just saying, I don't know, but why can't we develop our own technology to be able to monitor procurement in real time? And then the scoreboard I was talking about is that I saw this unique scoreboard while I was doing this research for SME finance. There's a scoreboard that OECD countries do, which we can customize for the South African economy, and we know what's happening at the whole system. And I have to say, we do have very good statistical agency, but we must say, what are we monitoring? Which is more important than the others?
What are we monitoring and what are we measuring?
What we're measuring, yes. So now, so we should have almost like, there used to be actually one in the presidency. They used to have something called the PCAS, the presidential, whatever,
Right.
And they used to, it was called development indicators. And this discontinued for whatever reason. So it's a set of core indicators that everybody in school would know that what is the national vision, what do we want to do, what do we want to do in terms of investment in capital, what do we want to do in terms of investment in people, education. I would want to see on that scoreboard education output, what is the health indicators, So we must have I agree with you. And we've got such amazing technology. We must just bring it together into, I agree with you 100%.
Let's
like
talk
a
about
system that's
exactly
a SAP system for the country.
Let's talk about what to change. I know you may have spoken about it slightly earlier. Can you talk me through a BE deal that you admire, but not just because you admire it, but what are the design inputs that you like about that deal that we should be replicating? That's one. And then two, the formation of new transactions, as it were.
Okay, so let's start with the model deal.
Yes.
Let's talk about a mining deal. Okay, so for me, I once did a whole presentation on mining, and so the ideal transaction in mining, do you know that state ownership in the mines currently is 25% through the PIC?
Yes.
Yeah, through the PIC. So I would want to see us, I had this campaign that, bring back our minerals, and like,
did they bring them back?
Bring back our minerals. Yeah. So I remember I went to present it to Anglo, and in downtown, and I went interviewed them. So I think we should consolidate. So you should have a company to hold that 25% that the state has, and then on top of that, we need to have 10% for your BE.
Sorry, is that company not the PIC? Are you talking?
No, I'm just saying that the PIC would have a subsidiary that consolidates the share, that manages the shares in mining.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's in Norway they have something called the state's direct financial interest that manages minority interests in all those oil fields in Norway. Okay. Yeah, so it would be looking after your minority shareholdings in the mining industry along exactly the system in Norway. Okay. So then you'd have 10% for black ownership, the B transaction. 7.5% would be for communities. In all the work I did in mining, there's so little that goes back to the communities. We recently saw the anniversary of the Marikana, and the people live in desperate poverty. For sure. So we must have community ownership, and I've been saying that we must have a portion of the royalties must go towards this, towards the state, so towards this, to community ownership things. Yes. And then the PIC can manage it on behalf of the communities. Yeah. And because they get ripped off by the investment bankers, and it's sad in the research I did because we have this so-called success of Royal Bafokeng, but there's so many failures in terms of community ownership models. Yeah. Right. So then I would have 7.5% for the workers. I was at the National Union of Mine Workers conference. I spent 3 days there, and we must have, so that is 25%. So we've got 25% for BE, workers, community. And then I believe that the community and worker shares must have a 50% free carry, because most of these share ownership schemes for employees, they don't really, they haven't created value, partly because the economy is not growing, and then, but for other reasons as well, maybe it was structured. But I believe that, as I learned from the First Rand transaction, we must have a free carry for employees and workers. And First Rand, the shares for the foundation were free. Right. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. And so, so then that's my model of empowerment for mining industry. And then the second one is, the free carry. And then I think there has to be, now when I look back, if the central bank comes in as almost like a guarantor for these transactions as well, for the third-party finance, the cost of capital can go down, because what kills people is the cost of capital. And then it must happen within an environment where there is growth in the economy, because I've done a lot of work on jobs. People say SMEs create jobs. That's not true. The growth, like I've cut and sliced the data of the past 30 years. GDP growth of 1% results in job growth of 0.9. So
that statement stings. Yeah, because it's so etched in our minds. Are you saying SMEs do not create jobs? Or are you saying SMEs are not creating jobs?
No, I'm saying SMEs can't create jobs when there's low GDP growth. Yeah. So now, so I'll just explain that. So if I've cut and sliced the data over 30 years, Stats SA tells me I mustn't use the data for 1990s. They can't account for it, but I use the census. Okay. And then 1% GDP growth, 0.9% job growth. When we were growing by 3.5%, 4.8%, 2003, 2008, 0.9. 1% GDP growth, 4.5 times 0.9, 3.6% employment growth. We created 3.1 million jobs. So in this current period, so what that means, we are growing at 1% now. At 1% growth, the economy, according to my modeling, creates 150,000 jobs. Okay. The new entrants is about 600,000 to 700,000 every year. So if your business, Ted, your Trade Collector and all the fantastic businesses,
Trade and capital. Yes.
Trade and Capital, sorry,
Yes.
your business, and all the other businesses you're showing me, if they create 100 jobs, it's at the expense of another business. So it's a zero-sum game.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So obviously there are pockets of the economy that are growing and ones that are not growing. So what we are just seeing is that churn.
Sure.
But you can't go away from the macro drivers of job creation.
Right.
Yeah. So I guarantee you, I've sliced the numbers. We will create 150,000 jobs at this growth rate. Yeah.
Every year if we stay.
Every year if we stay here. But then the labor force is growing by 700,000.
And so you have a deficit.
So unemployment increases by 500,000 every year. That's what's happening. And if you look at the data for so that's on.
And the 500, you're only counting new entrants.
New entrants, yeah.
You're not talking about those who've gone out of business or have lost their jobs, etc., etc.
So you're not counting the people who were previously unemployed. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have a policy problem? And I ask this in this way. Is BE affecting our ability to attract investment?
Well, I'm old school. I believe that investment follows GDP growth, private investment.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what's called the Keynesian view.
Right.
You can't go to your board and say, let's invest in country A if there's no growth. So investment follows GDP growth. There was a time when consistently number one in terms of African FDI, I used to follow this from the 2000s, after the end of the war in Angola. That was the fastest, the biggest FDI until that boom ended, I think around 2014 with the current president,
Right.
But Angola was consistently the highest FDI in Africa.
Right.
Why? Because Angola was growing in double digits. So investment, please, the government has got it back to front. They think that private investment can kickstart the economy.
Yeah.
Private investment does not kickstart the economy unless you create special opportunities through procurement, as they've done for Eskom and Transnet. But you can't tell me that two sectors, Eskom and Transnet, IPPs and whatever, are going to create jobs for all of us. That's not true. So at a macro level, investment follows GDP growth. Because when we were growing from 2003 to 2008, investment to GDP went up from 14% to close to 22%.
But if the policy does not allow for GDP growth, we've got a problem.
Yeah, but GDP growth is basically, roughly speaking, Ted, is that GDP growth follows the growth of government spending. And I'm talking about, if you disaggregate government consumption and investment spending.
Okay.
So during that fast growth period, consumption spending was 5% and public investment was 14% a year.
Okay.
State-owned companies were investing how much each year? 18% a year increase here. So now what has happened now is that both of those metrics have collapsed. So your scoreboard that you're talking about, if you just monitor government consumption spending and public investment and you say that's part of the scoreboard, it must increase. That's what China does. Yeah. How much juice do you put into the economy?
Right.
Yeah, if it must juice to make this engine grow. I don't know why it's not obvious to most South Africans that you must put in enough juice into the car to make it grow. In China, it's called total social financing.
Okay.
And we need to have a metric of that. And they monitor this thing. When the economy is going into a downturn, as we saw last year in China, they put in more juice. It's so simple. I don't understand why people don't get it. You have to have the juice to make the system grow.
Did you follow the collapse of Evergrande in China?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
What do you make of it?
Well, obviously there was excesses. If you travel in China, as I did, you see that there's excess infrastructure because there's
There's such a thing.
Yeah. There's 1.4 billion people, and nowhere did I traveled most of the states of the provinces. Nowhere did I feel there's traffic jams except in Shanghai, but everywhere else, people are not crowded. There's infrastructure. And there's too much of it. And you see these empty flats, these high rises.
Yes.
They've built these flats it reminds. You're talking about Dubai. I went to Dubai before Dubai was Dubai,
right?
And you go to the seafront. They were building these hotels, even the one where I was staying, and they were all empty because ahead of a tourist boom. So I'm just saying in China, there's excess infrastructure. There's too much flat housing. So that there's obviously a bubble, which they're taking out the. They're bursting the bubble in a responsible way, Yeah,
they did they collapsed it gently.
Yeah, they're collapsing it gently without making it have. They have 3 red lines, and they're collapsing it gently without causing too much chaos for the system. Yeah,
got you.
Yeah.
If you look at from an international lens point of view, is there a country with a model that you admire that you think we should be?
I think it's bits and pieces of different countries. Yeah. Okay. So I would say that I believe in a developmental welfare state.
Yeah.
So this is a fusion of what you see in Asia, the developmental states, and what you see in Scandinavia, where they provide high levels of social spending, education, health, relatively high taxes, and people pay for that, And but what shocked me when I looked at the data is that Japan, the most capitalist economy, they've got high levels of social spending, one of the highest, social security spending. I think it was about 17% of GDP. They have a good social net, although companies provide a lot of the social net there. Yeah, but I'm just saying that. So we have to provide a dynamic economy that grows, but you must create a safety net for people who, for whatever reason, can't cope. And then we must also create human development, education, health. And on education, number 1 is South Korea.
Okay.
Yeah. South Korea, in the 60s, they had the same level of human development as South Africa. And now they're the most educated country in the world. Right. Of 25 to 35s, 70% have tertiary qualifications.
Insane.
Yeah, so I would say it's a mix of different countries. Different countries have different models. China is an extreme. Like in infrastructure, they do everything in extreme. And but I would merge because there's some problems of the Chinese model, and people are. There's a lot of precautionary savings because they don't provide enough of a social safety net for people if they think they fall in bad times, like during COVID.
Yeah.
Education, health lags as well. So I'm just saying that we should provide a mix of
balance. Right.
So I like if you look at South Korea education, US education, Norway education. Those are the countries that shoot the lights out. Canada is the most educated country. 61% of the adult population has a tertiary qualification. Why can't we get there? I think we're about 8%. Why can't we be at 61%? Like Canada, the most educated country in the world.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Direct question. In case someone's been watching and maybe they haven't understood you, would you scrap BE?
No, BE must be rebranded.
Okay.
If it requires another name, we must have a wholesale rebranding of this process. It has been associated with corruption and the lack of performance of the economy. We must develop a new template that is going to, it must be smart policies, like the ones I've been talking to you about, that address the weaknesses of the BE policies that we had over the past. And obviously, as you say, it must be geared towards the growing sectors of the economy. We don't have a proper industrial policy. Can your child or ordinary South African tell me which sectors the government believes are going to grow? And then you put resources behind that, as China did for electric vehicles, for solar panels and all those things. And it must be linked to your industrial policies and your new sectors of the economy. But if I analyze do you know, beyond renewables and what's happening at Transnet, the transmission companies, where are the opportunities? I don't see them.
I've always said that this podcast was started to demonstrate the best of us. You truly represent the best of us. Thank you for what I think is going to be an amazing rewatch of this conversation. Thank you for the brilliance. I want to extract something from, that brilliant mind of yours, and sort of pay it forward. What's the one idea you've had that you have not had time to work on?
That I have not had time to work on? Sure. I've worked on a lot of things. Yeah. I feel like I'm going to stop doing this work, the research work, as I told you. I want to look at AI. Economists are skeptical about this technology boost that's going to happen. Like I'm old enough to remember the dot-com boom, and when you look at the numbers on we're spending on the what is called the Mag 7.
Yes,
the amount of capital investment that they're doing, it's crazy. It's about you'll replay this in a couple of years.
Right.
This could be the biggest bust of a bubble that will bring down. Yeah, it's incredible. Like I read, it's just it's incredible. Yeah. Because the productivity gains, I don't think they will follow as quickly. Productivity gains happen over a long period. They don't happen in short, sharp spikes, although there was one in the US in the 90s. But over the long period, it happens gradually in terms of productivity things. Yeah.
Are you saying that because of what happened with GPT-5 and suddenly everybody woke up and realized?
Yes. Because like you saw DeepSeek that came out. Yeah. So in my spare time, I'd like to look into that, because this is a hobby, I have random hobbies, things that fascinate me from time to time that I follow, and even if there's no.
Have you understood the concept of AGI?
Yes. Yeah. I'm starting to.
I'm starting to. When you do the research, please tell me if you agree with this notion or not. I'll share it so that when you do your research, you also let me know. I don't believe that we as humans have the capacity to develop AGI.
Yes.
So we're going to get to a certain point where, I don't know if you
what
know,
we call diminishing returns. Yeah.
I think we are already there.
Yeah.
Because all the human knowledge has already been put into every single model. The only way you get to AGI, and this is what is spooking, is going to spook everyone. The only way you get to AGI, I think, is that this intelligence has to get there by itself. Because we've reached the limit.
You can't force it.
Yeah. It's going to, but you have to allow it to be self-replicating and then self-learning. And that's where you sort of have to look into the abyss, because you do not know what those outcomes are going to be. So if humans decide we've created AGI, then what we've simply done is we've changed the definition. But a human being cannot create an alien intelligence.
I'm with you. I will talk about
this. Exactly. That's episode. That's our next.
But this is, when I read the statistics on what they're doing, the Mag 7, Magnificent 7, it's incredible. Yeah.
Yes, totally. I'm keen to see that. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed this conversation. If you've made it this far, please tell a friend to tell a friend. I think this has been a stunning conversation, and look up on one of these. Click on one of these if you want to see more episodes. This is the Winners Win podcast. We are.